The fall of the mask. What if everything you've built, your job, your relationships, your entire identity, is based on a lie? This is not just a video, it's a wake-up call. How many times have you looked in the mirror and failed to recognize the person staring back? That stranger with familiar features whose eyes hold a question you're afraid to answer. This disconnection is the first sign that you might be living a lie, not a deliberate deception, but a profound separation from your authentic self. This separation begins innocently enough. We create masks as survival mechanisms, crafting personas designed to navigate the complex social landscape around us. We learn early which expressions earn approval, which behaviors are rewarded, which parts of ourselves should remain hidden. The professional mask, the social mask, the family mask. Each one meticulously crafted for its specific environment. Jung understood this phenomenon deeply. The human psyche naturally develops these protective layers, these carefully constructed facades that shield our vulnerable core from potential harm. The problem isn't that we create these masks, it's that eventually we forget they're masks at all. The line between performance and identity blurs until we can no longer distinguish between what we truly feel and what we've learned to display. Look around at the choreography of modern life. The alarm that rings at precisely the same time each morning, the practiced smile in the office elevator, the rehearsed small talk at social gatherings, the curated version of ourselves we present on social media, the scripted responses, the predictable reactions, the careful avoidance of anything too raw, too real, too revealing. And beneath it all, a hollowness grows, a vague but persistent sense that something essential is missing. A quiet desperation that sometimes rises to the surface in moments of solitude, when the performances end and the stage goes dark. In these rare moments of silence, we might hear a whisper from somewhere deep within, a voice almost forgotten, asking if this life, this carefully constructed edifice of appearances and expectations, is really ours at all. The architecture of masks. We begin building our masks in childhood, crafting them with the innocent intuition of young architects. Watch any playground interaction, and you'll see this process unfolding. Children experimenting with behaviors, noting which actions bring acceptance and which trigger rejection. Every approving nod from a parent, every laugh from a peer, every moment of inclusion or exclusion shapes the blueprint of the personas we'll carry into adulthood. This architecture becomes increasingly sophisticated as we grow. The teenage years accelerate the construction, adding layers of complexity as social hierarchies intensify. We learn to speak differently among different groups, to highlight certain aspects of ourselves while concealing others. By early adulthood, many of us have constructed an entire portfolio of selves, each one designed for specific environments, relationships, and situations. The Stoics understood this phenomenon with remarkable clarity. Epictetus observed how humans become entangled in appearances, how we learn to value ourselves through the eyes of others rather than through our own discernment. We become actors in a play written by others, measuring our worth by the applause we receive rather than by the truth we embody. The masks begin as tools, but transform into identities that we defend as if they were our actual selves. The psychological adaptation happens so gradually that we rarely notice the shift. What begins as conscious adjustment, speaking more formally in professional settings, suppressing certain opinions in particular company, slowly calcifies into automatic behavior. The performance becomes effortless, not because it's authentic, but because it's been rehearsed thousands of times. The emotional cost of this masquerade accrues silently. Maintaining incongruence between inner experience and outer expression requires psychological energy. It creates a constant low-grade vigilance, a background process always running, monitoring the alignment between our presentation and our environment's expectations. This vigilance drains us in ways we don't immediately recognize. Consider how exhausted you feel after spending time in environments where you must be on, where your mask must be particularly elaborate or well-maintained. The relief of returning home and being yourself speaks to the burden of performance. Yet for many, even this relief has become elusive, as the mask has adhered so completely that it remains in place, even in private moments. Our modern societal architecture reinforces this disconnection. Social media platforms reward perfectly calibrated personas over messy authenticity. Professional environments often value specific personality traits over others, regardless of individual differences. Even intimate relationships can become theaters of performance as we present idealized versions of ourselves to maintain connection. The tragedy deepens as we begin to evaluate our own worth through metrics of external validation, likes, followers, professional titles, material acquisitions, rather than through our alignment with internal values and authentic expression. We construct ever more elaborate facades, each one further obscuring the person behind the performance. Eventually, we find ourselves living in a house of mirrors, surrounded by reflections that show us only what we've been conditioned to present. Our masks, designed originally as interfaces between our inner selves and the outside world, become barriers that prevent genuine connection with others, but more importantly, with ourselves. The architecture that was meant to protect us becomes a labyrinth in which we lose our way, forgetting what it means to simply be rather than to perform being. When the interior screams, the body keeps the score. When we live disconnected from our authentic selves, our physical and emotional systems eventually sound the alarm. Modern psychology has given these signals clinical names: anxiety, depression, burnout, chronic fatigue. But they often share a common root: the unsustainable tension between who we are and who we pretend to be. These symptoms manifest in increasingly severe ways until we can no longer ignore them. The mild discomfort of Sunday evening dread evolves into Monday morning panic attacks. The occasional insomnia transforms into chronic sleep disturbance. The temporary feeling of being overwhelmed becomes persistent brain fog and emotional numbness. Our bodies, more honest than our conscious minds, refuse to maintain the charade indefinitely. Jung recognized this process as the emergence of the shadow, those disowned aspects of ourselves that we've banished from conscious awareness. When we consistently repress parts of our authentic nature to maintain our social masks, these elements don't simply disappear. They accumulate in our unconscious mind, gathering energy until they demand recognition through symptoms that disrupt our carefully constructed facades. The wisdom of the body's protest is profound. Physical symptoms serve as messengers when our conscious mind refuses to acknowledge the truth. The headache that appears only in certain environments. The digestive issues that coincide with specific relationships. The chronic tension in specific muscle groups. These are not random malfunctions, but precisely targeted communications from a system desperate to restore authenticity. Marcus Aurelius understood this connection between psychological integrity and physical well-being. He observed that harmony between thought, word, and action was essential not just for ethical living, but for mental health. When we consistently violate this harmony, we create internal conflict that inevitably manifests as suffering. The Stoic practice of examining one's life wasn't merely philosophical, it was therapeutic, designed to restore congruence between belief and behavior. The emotional landscape of the inauthentic life has its own distinctive topography. Beneath the surface of achievement and social compliance often lies a peculiar combination of emptiness and overwhelm. Many describe it as going through the motions, watching their life from a distance, feeling simultaneously overextended and unfulfilled. Relationships feel hollow, despite constant connection. Achievements bring brief satisfaction quickly, followed by a return to restlessness. This internal screaming often intensifies in midlife, when the rewards of social conformity begin to ring hollow against the background of existential awareness. The questions we've suppressed become impossible to ignore. Is this all there is? Is this truly my life? Have I been living according to my own values or someone else's expectations? The midlife crisis, much maligned in popular culture, often represents this authentic, self-demanding recognition after decades of neglect. Our cultural conditioning teaches us to interpret these signals as problems to be solved, rather than messages to be heeded. We medicate the symptoms, restructure our external circumstances, or double down on achievement in hopes of silencing the internal alarm. Yet these approaches typically provide only temporary relief, because they address the manifestation rather than the root cause. The existential discomfort cannot be permanently suppressed because it serves an essential function. It is the compass needle pointing toward authenticity. The anxiety, depression, and burnout that plague our modern existence are not merely dysfunctions to be corrected, but doorways to deeper self-knowledge. They are the interior screaming against the violence of inauthenticity, the soul's desperate attempt to reclaim its rightful expression before it's too late. When we learn to listen to these symptoms rather than merely managing them, we begin to decode their message. There is a gulf between who you truly are and how you're living. This gulf can be bridged, but only through the courage to face what lies beneath the masks we've worn for so long. The philosophy of authenticity. Throughout history, philosophers have recognized the human tendency towards self-deception and the profound suffering it causes. Tolstoy captured this dilemma masterfully in his examination of conventional life, the pursuit of success and social standing that ultimately rings hollow in the face of genuine existential questions. His insight was not merely literary, but deeply personal, emerging from his own crisis of meaning despite achieving everything society deemed valuable. The emptiness that Tolstoy described manifests when we build our lives around external metrics rather than internal truth. We accumulate achievements, possessions, and social status only to discover they cannot fill the void created by disconnection from our authentic selves. This revelation often comes as a devastating shock precisely because we've followed all the prescribed rules for a successful life. We did everything right, yet something feels fundamentally wrong. Kierkegaard identified this condition as a particular form of despair, the despair of not being oneself. He recognized that humans often choose the comfort of conformity over the challenge of authentic existence. We surrender our unique perspectives and possibilities to merge with the crowd, gaining security but losing vitality in the process. The safety of conventional life comes at the cost of our distinctive humanity. This exchange, authenticity for security, lies at the heart of what Seneca called living according to nature. The Stoic concept doesn't refer to some primitive existence, but to living in alignment with our true nature as conscious, rational beings capable of making choices based on our own values, rather than externally imposed norms. When we violate this alignment, we create internal conflict that no external success can resolve. Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich serves as perhaps the most powerful literary mirror of this modern condition. The protagonist, a successful judge who has lived entirely by societal expectations, confronts the emptiness of his existence only when facing death. The story's power comes from its terrible recognition scene, the moment when Ivan realizes that his entire life has been not the real thing. This fictional account reflects countless real experiences of those who awaken to their inauthenticity only after decades of misdirected living. The contemporary manifestation of this sickness of the self appears in subtler but equally destructive forms. We see it in the epidemic of burnout among professionals who have achieved every external marker of success, yet feel profoundly unfulfilled. We recognize it in the proliferation of anxiety disorders in societies that have never been more materially comfortable. We observe it in the relentless pursuit of digital validation that leaves people feeling more isolated than ever. Social conformity perpetuates this cycle of inauthenticity through powerful mechanisms of reward and punishment. From early education that prizes compliance over creativity to workplace cultures that value presentation over substance, our institutions often reinforce the very masks that separate us from ourselves. The person who questions these norms risks not only external judgment, but the far more destabilizing process of confronting their own inauthenticity. The authentic life requires a philosophical shift, from viewing life as a performance to be perfected, to recognizing it as an expression to be discovered. This shift doesn't demand dramatic external changes so much as a fundamental reorientation toward one's own experience. It means learning to value the internal compass of genuine feeling and insight over the external validation of social approval. This philosophy of authenticity transcends simple self-expression, or being true to yourself in the shallow modern sense. It's not about indulging every impulse or rejecting all social norms. Rather, it involves the more nuanced work of discerning which aspects of our social conditioning align with our deepest values and which represent accommodations to external pressure. It requires distinguishing between masks we've chosen consciously and those we've adopted unconsciously. The ultimate philosophical insight may be that authenticity isn't a fixed state to achieve, but a continuous practice of alignment. Each day presents new opportunities to choose between convenience and truth, between what's expected and what's genuine. The path toward authenticity doesn't eliminate social masks entirely. They remain necessary interfaces for human interaction, but transforms them from prison walls into conscious tools used with awareness rather than compulsion. The painful awakening. The journey toward authenticity rarely begins with gentle epiphany. More often, it arrives through disruption, a crisis that shatters the carefully maintained illusion of our constructed lives. The catalyst might be external: job loss, divorce, illness, or the death of someone close. Or it might be internal: a panic attack in the middle of a board meeting, a sudden inability to perform the social roles we've mastered, or the quiet devastation of achieving a long-sought goal only to find it meaningless. These moments of crisis carry transformative potential precisely because they strip away our usual defenses. When the carefully constructed narrative of our lives collapses, we glimpse something raw and real beneath the ruins. The pain of this collapse, what many experience as hitting bottom, creates an opening where our habitual patterns of avoidance no longer function. Epictetus captured this paradox in his concept of amor fati, the love of fate, including its hardships. The Stoic insight wasn't about masochistic enjoyment of suffering, but recognition that our most difficult experiences often become our most valuable teachers. The moments when we can no longer maintain our masks become invitations to discover what lies beneath them. Imagine the scene. A successful executive sits alone in her car, unable to enter her workplace. Her hands tremble on the steering wheel as panic surges through her body. The carefully applied makeup, the perfectly tailored suit, the practiced confidence she's maintained for years, none of it can be summoned. Something has broken through. Something authentic that will no longer be denied. In this moment of crisis, there is also profound opportunity. Contemporary narratives of awakening often follow similar patterns. The athlete who reaches the pinnacle of success only to confront an inner emptiness. The celebrity who achieves fame but loses connection with their authentic voice. The professional who masters every external metric of achievement only to realize they've been climbing someone else's ladder. These stories resonate because they reflect a universal pattern of human experience. The courage required for this confrontation cannot be overstated. To face the possibility that significant portions of our lives have been lived inauthentically threatens our very sense of identity. Who am I, if not the roles I've perfected? What remains when the masks are removed? These questions evoke existential vertigo, the disorienting freedom that comes with recognizing that much of what we thought was fixed is actually fluid. Much of what seemed necessary was actually choice. The practice of truth. The path back to authenticity is both simpler and more challenging than most imagine. It begins not with dramatic external changes, but with the creation of space, physical, mental, and emotional, where the authentic self can gradually re-emerge. This practice of truth involves specific methods that counteract our habitual patterns of disconnection. Silence serves as the foundation. In a world of constant noise and stimulation, deliberate periods of quiet allow us to distinguish between societal voices and our own inner guidance. This might take the form of meditation, solitary walks, or simply sitting without digital distraction. The initial discomfort of silence, The restlessness, the surge of suppressed thoughts and emotions, signals that we're making contact with layers of self that have long been ignored. Nature offers another pathway to authenticity. When we step away from human-constructed environments into natural settings, we often experience a palpable shift. The complex demands of social performance fall away, allowing a more fundamental sense of being to emerge. Mountains don't care about our professional status. Rivers aren't impressed by our social media metrics. Trees don't respond to our carefully crafted personas. In nature, the masks we wear become obviously unnecessary. Professional support through therapy, coaching, or spiritual direction provides structured accompaniment for this journey. Having a witness who isn't invested in our performance, who can help us identify our unconscious patterns and support us through the vulnerability of change, creates safety for authentic exploration. The therapeutic relationship often becomes the first context where we practice showing up without our usual masks. Seneca's practice of nightly self-examination offers a powerful tool for developing authentic awareness. Each evening we can ask, where did I act from external pressure rather than internal conviction? Where did I pretend to feel something I didn't? Where did I remain silent when truth required speaking? This isn't an exercise in self-criticism, but in compassionate clarity, recognizing patterns as the first step toward changing them. Daily practices can reinforce this return to authenticity. Before responding to requests or making decisions, we can pause to check whether our response comes from genuine desire or habitual people-pleasing. We can practice saying, "I need to think about that," rather than offering immediate agreement out of social conditioning. We can experiment with expressing unpopular opinions or revealing authentic emotions in low-risk contexts, gradually building the muscle of congruence. Detachment from others' opinions represents perhaps the most essential and challenging aspect of authentic living. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to others' needs or perspectives, but rather distinguishing between thoughtful consideration of feedback and reflexive conformity based on fear of disapproval. The Stoics practice this discernment by regularly exposing themselves to minor social disapproval, wearing slightly unusual clothing or speaking unpopular truths, to desensitize themselves to the discomfort of nonconformity. Automatic behaviors, those reflexive responses we've developed through years of social conditioning, require particular awareness. We can identify these patterns by noticing where we act without conscious choice, where our behavior feels mechanical rather than deliberate. Each time we catch ourselves in automatic reaction, we create an opportunity to pause, reconnect with our authentic response, and choose consciously rather than reactively. Reflective writing offers a powerful method for excavating authentic truth. The practice of journaling without censorship, allowing thoughts and feelings to flow without editing or judgment, often reveals insights and perspectives we habitually suppress. Questions that probe beneath surface experience can guide this exploration. What am I pretending not to know? What would I do if I weren't concerned with others' approval? What brings me alive beyond external validation? These practices of truth aren't dramatic in appearance, but profound in effect. Through their consistent application, we gradually restore connection with our authentic core. The process resembles archaeological excavation more than architectural construction, carefully removing layers of accumulated pretense to reveal what has been there all along, waiting to be recognized and expressed. Part 7. Authentic Life. The journey from self-deception to authenticity transforms not just our internal landscape, but our entire experience of living. Relationships deepen as they're built on genuine connection rather than mutual performance. Work becomes an expression of purpose rather than a pursuit of status. Everyday moments, from conversation to creativity to contemplation, take on new richness when experienced through an authentic lens. Remember the question we began with. That moment of non-recognition in the mirror, the stranger wearing your face. Through the practice of authenticity, that split begins to heal. The person in the mirror becomes not a carefully maintained facade, but a living embodiment of your unique truth. The eyes looking back at you hold clarity rather than question, presence rather than absence. The Stoic vision of a well-lived life centers precisely on this alignment between inner truth and outer expression. The good life isn't measured by wealth, achievement, or social standing, but by the courage to live in accordance with our deepest nature. This courage reveals itself not in grand gestures, but in the 1,000 small choices we make each day. To speak truth when silence would be easier, to follow conviction when conformity would be safer, to express genuine emotion when performance would be more comfortable. The call to authentic living isn't a call to perfection. The authentic self includes limitations, contradictions, and ongoing growth. The difference lies in living these realities consciously rather than concealing them beneath layers of pretense. Authenticity doesn't promise constant happiness, but it offers something more valuable: the deep satisfaction of becoming who you truly are. Imagine letting the mask fall completely, not in defiance or drama, but in the quiet recognition that it's no longer needed. Feel the cool air on your true face. Notice how the world looks different through unclouded eyes. This is your life, no longer a lie but a living truth. This is your one wild and precious existence, finally and fully claimed. Now tell us, is your life a lie? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss future content. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters.